probably agree on.
Yeah, the playoff team for sure.
I tell you what, I don't think there was a more accurate state. And
if they struggle again, I don't think there's any way you can keep Alex Grinch. But
what's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Cover 3 College Ball Podcast. It's another edition of Summer School. That's our college ball preview show. Today, it's BYU. That's Cougar Sports Insider's Jeff Hansen. Jeff, welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks, Bud. Been a year crazy since last year. Feels like it was just yesterday, and here we are getting ready for 24. I'm
reminded of just how many damn good team sites we have in a 24/7 sports network. I'm like, everybody knows their stuff, and they live, eat, breathe, sleep it. So it's fantastic to have you back on. Maiden voyage for BYU into the Big 12 last year was tough, although all of the new teams had quite a bit of difficulty. What do you think this staff learned from their first year in the Big 12?
It's a good question. I think so. This staff, you look at Kalani Sitake, Aaron Roderick, Jay Hill, they were all at Utah when Utah went to the Pac-12. And so they knew that like the competition obviously is going to be a lot tougher. They kind of knew what to expect from that talent jump standpoint. What they didn't expect is how much more physical the Big 12 is. I think there's this outside of, Texas and the Midwest, the thought of the Big 12 was there's this no defense, pass happy. Everybody's running the spread. Everybody's running Mike Leach offense. And that wasn't the case. There's a lot of damn good rushers, really good running game, strong play in the trenches. And I think BYU knew what the talent jump was going to be. I don't think they were prepared for the physicality, especially on the line of scrimmage. I think that was a big eye opener for them because, going to the Pac-12, especially 10 years ago, it wasn't quite as physical as the Big 12 is now. That was a big lesson for the coaching staff.
Do you think they've made some improvements in those areas this year along the lines of scrimmage?
Yeah, I think so. You look at, especially on the defensive line, they went out and really, I think there were 7 or 8 different defensive linemen they brought in from their high school recruiting class. They added a bunch of offensive linemen out of the portal as well, a couple of offensive linemen at least. Bringing guys off of missions, that's always a weird nuance with BYU. So a lot of the newcomers are playing right there on the line of scrimmage. They definitely recognized that depth certainly wasn't there, talent wasn't there, and they need to emphasize it more.
So where position group-wise is this team clearly better in your mind than it was last year?
Yeah, the defensive line for sure, especially on the edges. And I think that because BYU's better on the edges, they're going to be better on the interior as well. They went out and added some pass rushers that they're going to be able to put alongside Tyler Batty, who's really, really good. They just didn't have a whole lot there last year. So Tyler Batty was seeing double teams on every single snap. So that helps a ton. And then what they've also been able to do, because they have a little bit more juice on the edges, some of their guys like Blake Mangelson, who kind of emerged as a walk-on and played really, really well last year, he's probably going to play a lot more inside this year. Now they have the talent and the depth on the outside that they can move some of those guys who were really big edge rushers that are, playing at like 275, 280. They could pack on 10 more pounds, 20 more pounds and play inside and get a little more juice from the inside.
Jeff, who's a player who probably won't be voted to first or second team preseason All Big 12, who maybe could make that team come the final version of it in the postseason?
Yeah, John Nelson at defensive tackle. And I think we talked about him last year a little bit. When he's healthy, he's a different player. He was I think he was a 2-star, maybe a low 3-star recruit out of a small high school in Utah. And he came to BYU, I think BYU and maybe Utah State were his only scholarship offers. And as soon as he got to campus, he put on like 40 pounds, 50 pounds, a good weight. He's huge. I mean, he's a big, big dude. And he plays super aggressive. It's like his body, his mind doesn't realize that his body has gained, 50 pounds. And he's still playing like a 220-pound edge rusher, but he does it from the defensive tackle spot. He got hurt. I can't remember exactly when, 4 or 5 games into last year. And you could see the defense took a dramatic change at that point. Nobody's talking about John Nelson, but I think John Nelson, by the end of the year, provided some help. He's a guy that a lot of BYU fans are going to recognize.
Kind of one of those guys where if you're on a coaching staff who played BYU in those first couple games, you definitely recall him, and everybody else just didn't have to face him. I assume the answer will be defensive line, but maybe there's another answer here. Where can they most afford to dip into their depth?
Yeah, the defensive line, I think, is the answer. Beyond that, the linebacker depth, it's young, but there's a ton of talent at linebacker. They're bringing back Ben Bywater. He's healthy. They had a lot of guys that kind of emerged last year. Ace Kafusi, Sialia Serra, Harrison Taggart. Those were all pretty highly recruited guys that are now, I guess, entering their sophomore years at BYU. And then they got a guy from Weber State and Jack Kelly, who, if you've never heard of Jack Kelly, his film, you got to take it with that FCS grain of salt, right? But his film is unreal. He's one of the most athletic players on the team. And for my dollar, he immediately became BYU's best NFL prospect when he joined the roster. He's a very, very exciting player. So BYU will add him to that linebacker room, and he's going to do a lot for him.
So fall position battle or two that you are most looking forward to the outcome?
Man, quarterback mostly because we could stop talking about it once it's done. But that's what every BYU fan in the world is worried about right now. And I get it. You know, BYU's got a long quarterback history dating back to Jim McMahon and Steve Young, all the way, more recently, Zach Wilson and Jaron Hall. BYU does quarterback really, really well. They didn't do quarterback really well last year. Keaton Slovis got hurt after kind of a ho-hum season. Jake Retzlaff came in for 4 games, and though the offense looked better, you look at Retzlaff's stats, he wasn't much better, and he was probably worse than Slovis was. He was young. It was his first year out of junior college. He had kind of a funny route to get there, so he can get better for sure. And BYU adds Gary Bohannon, who kind of got ran out of Baylor, right, and went to USF, and then had a pretty major injury. So he's in the mix, and they added Utah State transfer McKay Hillstead, who was really good, but he's 5'10". He's a smaller guy. So there's a lot of question marks there. I'm probably a little bit more high on the outlook of what they could become than the average fan is. But until that quarterback battle is settled, I think every BYU fan in the world is looking at that position.
So a legit 3-way battle here, or kind of more of a 2-way with Retzlaff and Bohannon? Or
Yeah, probably 2-way. But as soon as McKay Hillstead figures out the playbook, he joined late. He was the second transfer window. As soon as he understands the playbook, I think he's right there in the mix. If he shows up at camp and is ready to go, I think it's a 3-way battle for sure. But playbooks take time, right?
Indeed. Is Bohannon healthy? Like, the shoulder was fairly significant from what I recall.
Yeah, it was a pretty gnarly shoulder injury, and he's healthy enough. He played throughout all of spring ball, and he got better. I mean, his first couple of practices in spring ball was like, whoa, is this really going to be the guy? Yeah, bad whoa. Right. Yeah, but by the end of camp, though he was still making mistakes and things like that, you could see that he was clearly getting better. And it was the thought process is, okay, maybe that's rust, hasn't played in a year and a half. He's getting back into the swing of things. So this summer's huge for him, because if he continues on that trajectory, then I think he goes into fall camp and is really competing for that starting spot. But if he still has those lingering issues, then I think it's Jake Retzlaff's job to lose.
Will they have to run a different style of offense if it's one guy as opposed to the other?
Not really. Maybe a few wrinkles here and there, but Gary Bohannon's, he's athletic enough as a runner. Jake Retzlaff maybe offers a little bit more from a designed run standpoint, but in terms of facilitating the offense, BYU, they've kind of started to use this phrase of a point guard quarterback, right? And both of those guys can do that. Retzlaff definitely offers more as a runner, but it's not like Jibo's a statue back there either. So,
is there a guy who, if he can kind of hit his potential a year earlier than we're all expecting him to right now, but like realistically do so, who could help change the course of their season?
Yeah, running back LJ Martin is the real deal. So he was a flip from Stanford last year. He got some run early. I think he ended up being the leading rusher on the team last year. That was kind of a bonus year. Nobody really expected him to make much of an impact as a true freshman. This was the year that everybody had kind of earmarked as, okay, we're going to see what we've got with LJ Martin. They got that a little bit early last year. If he can be the guy that it looked like he can be, I mean, he runs hard. He's a big, bulky back. Kind of reminds a lot of people of Tyler Algier and what he did at BYU. If LJ Martin can solidify the run game, it really won't matter who's playing quarterback. That's going to go a long ways in helping ease the concerns of the offense. So LJ Martin's the guy who BYU coaches certainly are hoping takes that step the most.
Jeff, I don't know who BYU angered for this schedule, but somebody at the Big 12 offices clearly is not particularly happy with the Cougs. So SMU in Wyoming in the non-conference is their own doing, but Utah, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, UCF, Arizona, Kansas?
Yeah, brutal.
who is so what? Who do they miss? Who's actually good? Iowa State, I guess. West Virginia,
Yeah,
maybe Texas Tech.
Yep, they miss Texas Tech. They'll miss TCU. But yeah, I mean, I think anybody that top 5 teams that you're looking at and saying these are probably the guys competing for the championship at the end, BYU's got them all, and it's a tough slate for the Cougars.
They do finish with Arizona State and Houston, who I think are probably the 2 worst teams in the league. But you also have to get to those final 2 games, right? Those are the final 2,
Yep,
or
yep.
or just 2 of the last 3, I guess. You have to get those games healthy, which obviously is maybe easier said than done. Do you think it's possible for them to make a bowl game this year?
I think so. I think a lot of things have to go right. I mean, let's be honest about it. I think the quarterback position has to take a step forward, but I think they can. And aside from those big name teams, right? Utah, Kansas State, there's a path that BYU can beat everybody else. I mean, the Big 12 doesn't have that one clear juggernaut that's going to run away and everybody else is fighting for second place. And so you look at the schedule and it's teams like UCF. I think UCF can be really, really good. I also think that they're an injury away from being, fighting for a bowl themselves, right? BYU's got UCF on the schedule. Arizona, how are they going to adjust to a brand new coaching staff? Their roster was gutted, right? If it was still that same team that arrived last year and they were all coming back, then Arizona's going to be tough. But now there's a path that I think BYU, you could see a win there, right? So I think there's enough of those games where BYU has to play well, but other teams have a lot of question marks themselves. And I think as fans, if you're a fan of a school, you tend to answer the questions on everybody else's roster a whole lot faster than you answer your own questions, right? So I think that BYU fans have kind of written this season off a little bit and said, hey, this is a 4-8, 5-7 season. But I think there's enough question marks on the rest of the schedule that BYU can surprise some people. I think BYU has a lot of continuity within the coaching staff and the roster, and that matters in this transfer portal era. That continuity is a big deal.
I had a chance to meet Kalani when I was in Orlando. He spoke at the Nike Coach of the Year clinic down here. His wife is from nearby Lakeland, Florida. Man, I got to tell you, and I don't know him personally, obviously not as well as you do. It seems like this guy truly cares about his players in like a real connection, total person development, type of a way. And I'm not saying that others don't, but that really did strike me.
It is, man. I mean, you can't meet Kalani and not walk away feeling like you're his best friend. I mean, he has that innate ability to just make you feel important. And it's because it's so genuine with him. I mean, it's really easy to root for Kalani Sitake. You want him to go undefeated because he's just such a good guy. And he does. He cares a lot about his players. You look at BYU and the transfer portal bonanza that's been happening across the country. Guys don't tend not to leave BYU. I mean, in terms of relative to everybody else in the country, BYU keeps most of their roster intact. And I think it's because of the culture that Kalani has. Hopefully the results on the field show up as a result. But yeah, I mean, these guys love to play for Kalani Sitake.
Jeff, I know we'll be watching all the developments with this team throughout fall camp and throughout the season. We'll be visiting Cougar Sports Insider. You guys can click the link there, kind of right over Jeff's left shoulder, the QR code up at the top. There you go. With the head on. Really appreciate the time, man. I've enjoyed this.
Appreciate it, bud. It's always a pleasure, man.
Yes, sir.